Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. Hope you're having a fantastic day. I want to thank you for all being here with me. If you all can hear me, please let me know and we will go ahead and get started. Today, we are going to be talking about the 5 big leaks of small stakes tournament players. And we're going to do this by going through some interactive quizzes. So let's get right to it. Quiz number 1. You all are going to take your time, think about this. In a $200 online tournament, we have ace-9 offsuit and the cutoff seat. They fold around to us. As you see, we're playing 50 big blinds deep. Should we fold, call, raise to 3,750, or raise to 6,000? Take a minute, think about it. This is a situation where, I can already tell you, we're going to make a raise to 3,750. No other play makes logical sense. We just want to make a standard open raise to about 2.5 big blinds. So that is what we do. Now, the big blind has maniacal stats and re-raises to 12,000. Okay? 3,750, 12,000. What do we do now? This is where a lot of people get themselves in trouble. Should we fold, call, re-raise to 26,200, or go all in? Again, take some time, think it over. We have some people who want to go all in. We have some people who want to call. We have a fold. All over the place. And that's because this really is a somewhat tricky scenario. But I think we should go all in. And the reason I think we should go all in this spot is because our opponent is re-raising so incredibly wide to the point that we have a decent amount of fold equity. And, there's even a chance if we get called, we do have the best hand when he has a hand like King, Queen, and decides to hero call. Or when he has a hand like, pocket sixes and decides to hero call. So I think this is a very, very good spot to rip it in. Let's see what happens. This time, the opponent calls with pocket threes, so super loose call. I suppose that is how it goes sometimes, but we win the flip. So what can you learn from this? The leak here is not adjusting to exploit different types of players. A lot of people there were thinking call in order to try to play a pot in position, but the problem with that is that ace-9 fares very, very poorly. Whereas if you just jam, you get to realize whatever equity you have, and you also have a whole lot of fold equity. So this is a situation where you really want to ask, what do I want to accomplish? And right there, I do think with the ace-9 offsuit, it's probably closer to a fold than it is to a call. And that's because what's going to happen on the flop? Well, you're usually going to have ace-high or top pair bad kicker. And if your opponent bets and you miss, I guess you're supposed to stick around, but then what if they just keep betting on the turn, which will happen a decent amount of the time? That's not a good scenario for you at all. So you want to avoid that. Do you want to fold it against the maniac? Not really. You want to re-raise small against the maniac and then fold if he jams? Not really. So if you think about it, we really don't have very many great options. If you all did type a different option besides all in, let me know why. Tell me why, and we'll try to talk through it because I want to do everything I can to help you fix whatever mindset problems or thought logic problems that you all have pertaining to this. Also, by the way, these quizzes are all on pokercoaching.com, and they all illustrate very key points that you must master if you want to succeed at poker tournaments. What is the worst hand I shove in this scenario? That is a good question, actually, because in this spot, I'm probably going to be shoving pretty wide, and that's just because of my opponent's stats. If you take a look at their stats, they are 3-betting 15% of the time. That's pretty high, but also they're involved in a lot of pots. They're stealing a lot. So we don't have a ton of hands. I think 79 hands on the opponent, but the opponent really is getting after it. I think like ace-9 is a pretty bad hand to jam. So in this situation, this is probably near the bottom of it, but I certainly wouldn't mind jamming stuff like queen-jack offsuit or king-jack offsuit or pocket twos. I think that would all be reasonable. So something like that. Ken says, you fold, we don't get these stats live, and you rarely play with a player long enough to get that kind of a read. I generally disagree with that to some extent, especially if you have played with the same player for an hour or two. You know who's really getting in there and blasting, and you know who's not. And against someone who's really getting in there blasting, I think you need to be willing to go with it. So, leak number one is not adjusting enough to exploit different player types. Because, like Ken says here, it just folds. And I get the idea of just folding because you're never really sure of your read. But as you play more and more and pay attention to situations like this, where you expect your opponent to 3-bet you a lot, you can see those ahead of time and then start adjusting. Thomas says the hands I listed flop a lot better than ace-9 offsuit. Queen-jack offsuit doesn't flop particularly well. Pocket twos doesn't flop particularly well. Also, it's not like we're getting good odds to set mine here, right? We have to put in 8,000 more. So it's like barely okay to set mine if we stack our opponent every time, which we don't. So I think you'd rather go for the fold equity. All right, let's take a look at another hand. We are in the big blind with ace-7 suited facing a raise. I'm sorry, facing a button limp and a small blind call. So 4,200 limp, 4,200 call. We have ace-7 of spades in the big blind. Should we check, raise to 8,800, raise to 20,200, or go all in? Take a second to think it through. In this scenario, we have a very easy all in. A lot of you like check. A lot of you like all in. And this is a situation where what's going to happen if we check is we just let the players realize their equity. Both these players are relatively loose, which means they're probably limping all sorts of junk. If we want to get a little bit deep on preflop raise and VPIP stats, you see this player here has 64V, 21P. That means this player is limping with hands between like the 20th percentile and 60th percentile, which basically means all of his marginal junk. How does ace-7 suited fare against all the marginal junk? Well, it's faring pretty well. Also, all the marginal junk is going to fold if you go all in for the most part. You definitely don't want to raise small to 8,800, because if you raise 8,800, then you're just going to get called by both players, which is not really ideal because we are out of position against the initial limper, and then we just let people see the flop. You pretty much never want to raise small pre-flop after someone's already put money in the pot, because you're just not having them make a mistake. You make money when your opponents mess up, and if you min raise there, for example, they just can't mess up because they're making a profitable call, putting one more big blind into a 7 big blind pot. Also, raising to 20,000 doesn't make a whole lot of sense because in this situation, we're putting in roughly half our stack. You might as well just put in the rest and have maximum fold equity. Are we going all in regardless of our position? Well, no, that would be a different scenario, right? Stuart, it's very important to realize that you can't say, I always go all in with ace-7 suited for the stack size. However, that said, if there's a limp and a call in front of us and I have ace-7 of spades with 11 big blinds, I probably am just going to be all in the majority of scenarios. Also, it depends on who the limper is, right? If our limper on the button is a very tight limper, say they raise like 4% of hands pre-flop, but limp with 12% of hands, so 12/4, a very, very tight player, even though they do limp some. In that scenario, I am not jamming at all because then I expect to get called a ton because they're limping with the like 5th% hand down to 12th% hands, which are all pretty great, right? That's going to be like ace-10 and king-queen and ace-jack and pocket eights. So against those hands, I definitely do not want to be jamming. But in general, against most people, whenever you are facing a limp and you have about 10 big blinds, you should probably be all in with your hands that are in decent shape. And right here, small blind's going to fold a lot as well. So this time we did go all in, and they both fold. And some people look at this and say, oh, you didn't get any value with your ace-7. But realize there's not actually a whole lot of value to be had with the ace-7 because whenever you jam and they fold, you win this 11,000 pot. 11,000 is a lot. So don't think that this is not a good result. This is actually a fantastic result. This is why heads-up displays should be banned. Well, not if everyone has the heads-up display. And at this point in online poker, everyone has a heads-up display. If you are playing online poker without a heads-up display, you are making a significant mistake, like a gigantic mistake, unless, of course, you're playing on a site where they don't allow heads-up displays. But also realize these stats very much so apply live, and if you are not thinking in these terms, you're probably messing up. For example, if we have a guy who's really tight and limps, that's very different than if we have a guy who's really loose, like our player here, and they limp. And when you're playing live poker, you sure better be paying attention to your opponents and not playing on your phone or watching a sporting event on TV. You want to make a point to have an idea of what your opponents are doing, and you can definitely get an idea of what your opponents are doing if you just pay attention, even over the course of an hour or so. So, leak number 2, playing too tightly with a short stack. So many people, even many of you here, just wanted to check and see the flop and try to go from there. But picking up that 11,000 in the pot is substantial, and not picking that up is a big, big, big mistake. All right. Here's another hand. We're in the money in a $3,000 buy-in World Series of Poker event. We raised queens under the gun, +1, and got called by the big blind. Flop comes 8-7-5, and the big blind checks. This is a loose aggressive kid. Take a look. We're playing 58 big blinds deep. Should we check, bet 10,000, bet 20,000, or bet 30,000? Take a second. Give it some thought. Right here, we should check. And the reason I like a check is because this board nails the opponent's range. If you think about the hands that the big blind should be calling with, it's going to be a whole lot of middle cards, right? Also, when the big blind does have a hand, like let's say, well, Queen Jack, he's just going to fold if I bet. So I don't get any money in the pot against those hands that are drawing nearly dead. And if I do get check raised here, it is awful. Because what am I supposed to do, right? I mean, you can't just say, yeah, rip your stack in for 58 big blinds, because whenever you do get called, you're going to be in very, very bad shape. You are going to be against sets and straights and good draws, like 7-6 or something like that. So in this scenario, when you don't really have much of a range advantage, and you certainly don't have the nut advantage, because right here, I may not even have pocket 5s. Obviously, I could have 8s and 7s, so could the opponent, but the opponent could have all the 8-7s. The opponent could even have 9-6s, 9-6 suited, maybe even offsuit. He could have 6-4 suited, maybe even offsuit. So the opponent just has way more nut hands in their range, or potential nut combinations in their range than I do. So in that scenario, you want to be checking. So it does go check, check. Turns to Queen of Hearts, and the big blind checks. Now we have a set. That's good. Should we check, bet 8,000, bet 16,000, or bet 24,000? Thinking about this right here, I don't even know the right answer. I have one in mind, though. And I got it. 16,000, I think. I agree with myself, who made this this quiz sometime in the recent past. So right here, you want to make a bet size that doesn't give your opponent great odds to draw with whatever potential draw they have. And realize if we bet 8,000, if the opponent even has a gut shot here, they're getting pretty good odds to call, right? So also realize that if they have any pair at this point, they're probably going to call 16 just like they're going to call 8. Now, I could actually get behind going 24,000 here, but the problem is that then the opponent will start folding out stuff like ace-5 or 5-3 suited type hands, which we don't really want. So I think to get called by all the made hands and to give the draws a pretty rough price to call, I think 16,000 is pretty nice. We definitely don't want to check here, by the way, even though we do have top set. We can get called by many worse hands like under pairs, 8, 7, a 6, 5, etc. So we definitely do not want to be checking at this point. And if I get raised now, I don't care, right? Because I'm happy to put my money in. This is very different than on the flop, where if I bet and get raised, where I could easily be in terrible shape. All right, river is the Jack of Hearts, so the 10-9 gets there. The opponent checks. Should we check? Bet 22,000, bet 44,000, or bet 66,000? Take a minute. Think about what we're trying to get called by, what we're trying to accomplish. Do we even want to bet? Because we could be against the 10-9 that would very likely check if the opponent's good. In this spot, I think we need to bet 22,000. Checking here is way too tight. We have the best hand almost every time. Also, if I bet 22,000 and get raised, I can conceivably still call. And you may say, well, couldn't your opponent have the nuts? Yeah, of course they could. They could also have some bluffs. Notice that all the random 6s missed. A lot of the random 9s missed. And also, a nice thing about betting 22,000 is a lot of people will view this as a value hand, but as a marginal made value hand, like ace queen, that will be put in a bad spot if it gets check raised. So this is a hand that you should bet small, because we are trying to get called by an 8 or a 7 or a 5, right? We're trying to get called by pretty bad hands, so we don't want to bet too big. And if we get raised, we can confidently stick around against most people. Now, if you know your opponent's just a super nit and will literally only raise you with a straight, well then sure, you can fold, but that kind of read is very difficult to have. Now, I know earlier I said you'll have some ideas of what your opponents are doing, but it's very different than my opponent will literally only raise me on the river with the nuts. Like, that kind of read is pretty hard to get because you don't actually get to the river all that often, and you definitely don't get raised on the river all that often. So this is a situation where we definitely need to go for value. So I do bet 22,000, opponent calls, and I win. Whenever they just check call, clearly I win. So leak number 3 of small stakes players, not protecting their range, meaning whenever you check behind on 8-7-5 on the flop, if you bet all of your overpairs, what does that mean you have? Let's go back to that spot. In this scenario, if you bet all your overpairs here and you check with ace, king, ace, queen, ace, jack, king, queen, your checking range is all garbage. Checking back these pocket queens essentially makes it to where some hands in your checking range get to call down every single time, or the vast majority of the time, because we're not trying to fold our queens. And that protects our checking range. And on this board, we could actually check a very, very high portion of the time, and it would be fine. Also, many players take lines that lead to going broke in marginal spots. Just like in this scenario, if we bet the flop and get called or raised, that will result in us losing a lot of chips when we happen to be B, because we can't really bet and then fold. Warlock says, queens doesn't need a lot of protection, meaning you're not worried about it getting outdrawn. Should we check back jacks and 10s, or should we continuation bet those? Jacks and 10s become better bets to some extent, because like you said, they don't want various overcards to come. That said, I still think checking those is fine. I would be checking almost everything here, especially if I thought my opponent was a loose aggressive kid who was going to check raise me a lot, because you really just don't want to get check raised in tournaments. One of the worst things that can happen for you in this scenario is to just bet and get raised. And if you think that will happen a decent amount of the time, you want to do everything you can to sidestep that scenario. So with marginal hands or hands that really just cannot withstand pressure, you want to be very inclined to check back the flop, knowing that you can just call down on most turns and rivers. Obviously, if the river puts out a 4 straight, you should proceed with caution. But it's nice to know that if the board runs off fine enough, which it will probably 80% of the time, you just have an easy call down. And sometimes when it runs off bad, like say a 4 straight comes, your opponent will just keep checking because they'll have some one pair hand that thinks they can win a showdown. So you win those too. So really, it only works out poorly for you, something like 5 or 10% of the time when you check behind on the flop. All right, we have queen 6 of clubs. Button opens with 2.5 big blinds. Should we fold, call, re-raise to 300, or re-raise to 425? A lot of you have figured out this spot compared to what people did in the past. A lot of people in the past would just fold, and that is detrimentally terrible. Queen 6 suited, I think, is good enough to call. We don't need to re-raise because it's suited. If this was offsuit, I would actually be a little bit more inclined to consider raising. That said, when we are playing very deep stacked, I want to re-raise more of just a straight linear range. If we were shorter, I would be looking to use ace X, king X, queen X, maybe jack X as a bluff. If we had something like 30 big blinds or so. But with a very deep stack, I want to be re-raising with just a lot of my best hands. And queen 6 suited does not fall in that. And you may say, why re-raise your best hands? Well, it's because we're going to get called a lot. And when we're re-raising out of position and getting called a lot, I want to make sure that I have a hand that has plenty of playability. All right, flop comes 10, 9, 3, giving us a flush draw. I check, as I'm going to do with my whole range. Button bets 200. Should we fold, call, raise to 575, or raise to 875? Take a second, think it over. Don't fold. This is a spot where I definitely like raising. And the question is then how much? I want to make a raise size that looks reasonable. And my raising range in this scenario is going to be pocket 10s and 9s and 3s, which I would likely call preflop, 10-9, and then some of my junky draws. And I don't think we necessarily need to check raise the best draws, like ace 8 of clubs, let's say, or ace jack of clubs, because those hands have a decent amount of showdown value, whereas like queen high of clubs and jack high of clubs and 8 high of clubs, those hands really don't mind if the opponent folds. I would also probably check raise some straight draws here. And the nice thing is that even if I do get re-raised, I can continue with some of the draws that I'm raising. So I like raising about 575. 875 is certainly reasonable. It's a little bit big. Mainly because if I am raising to 875, I'm not exactly sure I want to do that with my nut hands. Because, I mean, yes, the opponent could have some equity, but really between 575 and 875, I think that is reasonable. So if you said 875, that's fine. But I typically go about 3 times the opponent's bet as long as they're using 2/3 pot bets or bigger, which is what the opponent did. Obviously, since we're deeper, you should consider using bigger sizings across the board because you want to be able to get your money in when you have the nut hands. And you like building a pot's not really bad if you are raising with a polarized range, which are your best hands and your draws, like I just outlined. So 875 could be fine. That's just like a little bit big though. It's a little bit big. Okay, so our opponent does call. Turn is now the 10 of diamonds. Yuck. Should we check, bet 600, bet 1100, or bet 1700? This is a dicey spot. Trying to figure out what I would even do in this scenario. I think I know what I would do. Yep, I would go for 1100. That's exactly what I was thinking. Because here, if we bet 600, what's going to happen is we're going to get called by all draws, which is not really good for me because all draws have a lot of equity. And we're also going to get called by a lot of pairs and maybe even just ace high. But I think if we start betting bigger, that, again, continues to polarize my range a bit to either just really good hands like full houses at this point that want to build the pot, or draws that if I do bet here and get raised, I can easily fold. And this is a scenario, by the way, where the opponent should basically never raise or rarely raise. Because like, let's say he does have a hand like Jack 10 here. If he re-raises, what is my range to get all in with? Well, it's just going to be full houses, right? So a hand like Jack 10 really does not want to raise in the opponent's shoes. Yet, you do see a lot of people do that. But in general, that is not a good play at all. So whenever you are against what should be a polarized range and you have a hand that cannot beat the nut hands, you have to be very careful when it comes to raising, and you have to understand that a hand like Jack 10 on 10-9-3 is not actually all that strong whenever your opponent check raise the flop and then bet the turn. I mean, I could also get behind betting big here, like 1700. The problem is that sometimes we are going to run into a 10 that's just not going to fold. And when that's the case, I want to make sure that I lose the least amount possible. If I do bet this turn and the opponent calls, well, let's see what happens this time. Oh, opponent just folds. Makes our life easy. If the opponent did call, I would have very likely continued bluffing this river, or on whatever river we get, just because in this scenario, the opponent's range is going to be some 10s, which of course are never folding, but also some 9s, some draws that are better than mine, like ace-high clubs and king-high clubs, some draws that are worse than mine that I don't want to check and have them bluff, and then I have to fold. So I'm going to be betting the river for a medium size. So if pot here would go up to, 3,600, I would bet something like 1,600, 1,800, something like that on the river. And I think that's going to put the opponent in a pretty bad spot. All right. So leak number 4, playing to passively post-flop from the big blind. You have to fight for pots. So many people think that they can just call pre-flop with all sorts of stuff and then just check call or check fold all the time. And now, look, if you don't flop anything, if you get a very, very bad flop or just that you completely miss, like say I call the queen 6 of clubs and it comes 9-8-2, no clubs, it's fine just to check fold. I have no hand, no draw, so get out of the way. But if you flop a flush draw or a gut shot or something like that, you have to be willing to battle. We are playing poker. We're not playing sit around and knit it up and hope I set up someone. By the way, the people who do sit around trying to set up someone where you both just get good hands and you happen to have the best, very often those players don't even get paid because they are not battling. Their opponents know when you have a good hand because you're not giving them action. So, leak number 5 is failing to study away from the table. A lot of you here have given some answers that are not so good. And, that's okay. That actually just means you have a long way to improve. And having a long way to improve is perfectly fine. That's actually good because I can help you improve. So let's review these 5 big leagues of tournament players. Number 1, not adjusting enough to exploit different player types. This is huge, especially now where so many people are trying to advocate learning to play like a GTO robot and never, ever adjusting. I mean, this is very, very important. You make money when your opponents mess up and when you capitalize on them messing up. And learning a good, solid, fundamentally sound default strategy, but also knowing how and when to adjust will make you way more money than if you do not adjust. Next, a lot of players play too tightly with a short stack. A lot of people don't realize that whenever you're facing a raise, and let's say you're in the big blind with a short stack, you should actually defend quite often. And that's because you're getting really good odds, assuming the raise is to 2 big blinds or 2.5 big blinds. If you're facing a 5 big blind raise, like you may face in some small stakes games, obviously you should just fold a lot because you're not getting very good pot odds at all. But when facing a min raise, you can call, recognizing if you get any sort of pair, you can just put your money in. If you get any sort of draw, you can just put your money in, and you're not really making all that big of a mistake. Next, a lot of players do not protect their ranges, especially their passive ranges, or this is kind of 2, I suppose. They take lines that lead to them going broke in marginal spots. This happens all the time. On pokercoaching.com, we have a monthly homework challenge where I present a scenario like some of these, and I ask you, how would you play your whole range in these situations? And very often, players are not so concerned with their checking range. They leave their checking range hanging out to dry because they'll bet with all their good hands and all their draws, and then their checking range is just all junk. So you have to make sure you check with some of your hands that are decently strong. And that pocket queens hand on 8-5-4 is a great example of that. Number 4, playing too passively post-flop from the big blind. You have to fight for pots. And number 5, failing to study away from the table. Thomas says in that previous hand, are we buying the showdown if I miss? What does buying the showdown mean? On the river, I already said if I miss, I am betting. I'm definitely bluffing. I'm not checking, trying to see a showdown with the queen high. Queen high is probably not good. We want to bet to get ace high and king high draws to fold. We want to bet to get a 9 to fold. We want to bet to get a hand like pocket 8s to fold. And we know we're not making a 10 fold. So in this scenario on the river, if our opponent calls, we need to use a medium-sized bet. If we bet and get raised on the flop, what do we do? I'm sorry, if we raise and get re-raised on the flop, what do we do? Probably fold this hand, which is unfortunate, but really I should not be getting raised here very often at all. All right, so when it comes to studying, one of the best things you can do, in my opinion, is take a look at pokercoaching.com. If you enjoyed these quizzes, we have over 600 of them like this, where you can go through them. I will explain to you all of the possible decisions, and that way you can consistently better your skills, especially if you don't have access to live poker near you or poker near you in general. This is a fantastic way to practice, and we are continuously adding new coaches. We just added Lexi Gavin. She'll be making quizzes in the very near future. We have guest coaches, and if you want to take your game to the next level, check out pokercoaching.com. And I, today, have made 2 ways for you to improve your game with poker coaching. If you just want a completely free membership, go to pokercoaching.com and sign up for your free membership. There's not a whole lot of content there, but there's enough to give you a very solid taste of the site. Or you can save big on a 1, 2, or 3-year membership at pokercoaching.com/savebig. So, in the free membership, here's what we have available. We have 20 hand quizzes. We did 4 here. There's 20 of them there available for you. There are 3 challenge webinars. Remember those homework challenges I mentioned? There are 3 of those you can go and take to test yourself. There are 10 video classes, roughly 30-minute classes on very specific topics. My students, they ask me questions all the time, and whenever they ask me a question that I have not addressed already in a 30-minute video, I'll usually make one. Also, there are pre-flop range charts, 100 big blind charts to help make sure you start with fundamentally sound strategies. And this is completely free. No credit cards required. It doesn't expire. You just go, you sign up, and you have access. Because look, I want you to realize the immense amount of value I'm giving before you have like any desire, or before I ever ask you to spend any money on my work, because I want to make sure that I provide value to you. Also, though, if you do want to sign up for a 1-year membership, 2-year membership, or a 3-year membership, here's what all you're going to get. You're going to get 600 interactive quizzes, and we add more every month. Also, 40 homework challenges. Each of these homework challenges takes something like an hour or two to complete. So that is 40 to 80 hours of very in-depth study material that you can do that will go a long way to making you the best player you can be. I mean, people always ask me, what should I do to get better? These homework challenges are absolute gold. My students who go through them crush poker. I realize it takes a little bit of work. It's not the easiest thing in the world, but it takes a little bit of hard work to get great at poker. Also, there are 20 of those 30-minute classes, and every week we're uploading 4 new quizzes. We are guaranteeing that we're going to do that for the next 3 years. If you do buy the 3-year membership, we will keep updating the site. I'm not quitting anytime soon. I know you all are probably used to a lot of the commentators and content creators and Twitch personalities and YouTube producers who make videos for like 2 months and they just disappear. Or they make videos for 2 months, they disappear, and then they come back a year later and start making videos again. That's not how I operate. I've been doing this for only 15 years, and I have yet to slow down or stop, and I do not plan on slowing down or stopping anytime soon. Also, you'll have a live homework challenge webinar every month for the next 3 years, a new class every month for the next 3 years, plus 10 free bonus training videos. The value of this, if you add it all up and break it all down, almost $11,000, but of course we're not going to charge you $11,000. You can go right now to pokercoaching.com/savebig. I have it brought up. You can scroll right down here, see all of the options, see everything that you can get access to. Here are your 10 bonus videos featuring many of the best players in the world, including Olivier Bousquet. He is a heads-up expert, so I had him discuss shorthanded battling games. We have Alex Fitzgerald discussing neutralizing their position. I know you all have mentioned Alex Fitzgerald in the comments here or there. We have Phil Hellmuth. Love him or hate him, he crushes the World Series. So we're going to be going through World Series hands. Scott Clements here, advanced bubble play. Scott Clements is a punisher at the poker table. We have Mike Sexton winning his first WPT. Anyway, a whole lot of bonus videos. And you actually get to pick which ones you get. So if you sign up for a year, you get access to 2 of these. If you sign up for 2 years, you get access to 5 of them. And if you sign up for 3 years, you get access to 10 of them. Your choice. As you see, we have all of these things available. And look, I realize that if I just give you a video on cash games, you may not play cash games. So instead, I want you to pick whatever you want. And if you don't know what you want, send me an email and I'll outline your situation and I will explain it. I'll point you in the right direction. So here's the normal price: $399 for a year, $749 for 2 years, $999 for 3 years. But if you click on Save Big, right here, apply the coupon code. You see, we drop it down even more for you. Normally, poker coaching is $40 a month, right? So for the price of, what's this? 12 months. For the price of 1 year, you can get 3. And I'm doing my best to give you all an immense value because I realize that a lot of the time money is tight. When I first started playing poker, I had almost no money. I was working a $10 an hour job. I deposited $50 into party poker after I had spent $200 or $300 buying every poker book on the market. And I took it slow. I continuously grinded up, and eventually I started hiring private coaches at the rate of $100 an hour or $500 an hour, and that was immensely valuable. But I wish back when I first started, there was a way for me to get in-depth training at a relatively small price. And what is it, $250 for a year is an absolute steal. And if you know you're going to be playing poker in a year or two, I would tell you, go ahead and get 3 years. It's an absolute value. And you can get this at pokercoaching.com/savebig. Some of you are typing in questions. Can this PowerPoint be downloaded? If you want it, send me an email. We'll give it to you. What ranges are good to play from the big blind? Well, fortunately, at pokercoaching.com, they're there. Remember in that free membership I mentioned? Pre-flop charts for 100 big blinds. Go get your completely free pre-flop charts. By the way, if you are a poker coaching member, a paying poker coaching member, we have implementable GTO charts for 40 big blind play, 20 big blind play, deeper stacks, right? We have implementable GTO charts, and then you can adjust those to take advantage of whatever your opponents do incorrectly. Is the Ultimate Cash Game course still available? I believe so. Go to pokercoaching.com/cash. When you try leading without a made hand, you lose nearly 100% of the time on a paired board. Well, stop leading then. In a 1-3 game, you can't bet enough to get players to fold any pair. You lose tons of money in this scenario. Well, stop bluffing. Look, if your opponents don't fold, don't bluff. This again goes back to the people who want to try to play fundamentally sound GTO ranges against people who just don't fold. If your opponents have a pair and they're not folding a pair, stop trying to bluff them. If you have any questions for me, feel free to type them in the chat box. I'm happy to address them while we have a minute or two. Always happy to help people who want to learn. When does this coupon expire? I'm not exactly sure. At some point, though. You love my book, Mastering Small Stakes, No Limit Hold'em? You're very welcome. I'm glad that you enjoyed it, and I'm glad that you're continuously trying to improve your poker skills. Nicholas says, when you play in a live game, you don't want to be the fish, so you want to focus first on small stakes games. The cash game course is part of Poker Coaching Premium, or you can just get that. It is at pokercoaching.com/cash. Julian says the audiobook is great. Well, thank you. Yeah, I've read the vast majority of my books for audiobooks, and because I realize some people want to study, they want to listen, right? Which is great. So I make that for you. I try to make whatever content you all like in whatever format you want to consume it, because I realize everyone doesn't like to read, and I realize everyone doesn't like physical books, so they get ebooks. You know, I try to give you whatever you want. How do you play against spewy calling stations? Just play good cards and crush them. How do you handle people that will limp but then call giant raises? Only raise them with good hands, right? I mean, look, if your opponents are just doing something very basic, like putting loads of money in the pot with nothing, then life's easy. Just sit there, play good cards, and print your money. Should you structure your post-flop learning by street or by more specific line/boards? Sayed, I'll definitely tell you what to do. Go through the homework challenges at pokercoaching.com. I'm telling you, the homework challenges are going to explain how to think about your entire range. And that is how I generally suggest going about it. Nicholas, I see you typed in a hand, but man, it's hard to read here. I'm not going to read this. It's a bit of a mess. Hand histories are difficult for this program. When you've exited 7 tournaments prior to the money and large buy-ins, you feel like a fear of being aggressive. How do you get over it? Realize that every time you make any play, it either makes you money or loses you money. And if sitting there and being a nit loses you money, as it very often will, then you should not be a nit, right? Someone asked me via email just a second ago, essentially, how do they have the courage to triple barrel? And the answer is, if you don't triple barrel in spots where you know you should, you're losing money. Do we have content about ICM? Yes. Do we have content tailored to final table play? Yes. I believe you can use your short stack as a weapon. I mean, I suppose if you pick it up and throw it at someone, it'll definitely work as a weapon. You enjoyed my commentary at WPT London. Well, thank you very much. If you go to WPT's YouTube, I commentated World Poker Tour London and World Poker Tour Marrakesh recently. Those were both great long streams with fantastic players, so it was a nice educational experience. Is there any mixed game content on here? No. It is all No Limit Hold'em, because that is the game that I suggest the vast majority of people learn, because it very clearly has a future. It's almost certainly not going to die. And if you've looked at all the various mixed games and other games, they come and go, and inevitably what happens is people spend years of their lives learning a game that eventually fades. And No Limit Hold'em is not going to fade. I mean, it may slowly fade. All games slowly fade in theory. But if I had to tell people one thing to get into, it would be exactly No Limit Hold'em games, assuming you care about making money. Now, look, I realize all people don't play poker to make money. You may just not like No Limit Hold'em, because maybe you don't like running triple barrel bluffs, right? Or at least for lots of money. I get that. But at the same time, my students are trying to make money for the most part. Of course, they're trying to enjoy the game and they're trying to have fun, but also they want to be able to make life-changing money. And my job as a teacher is to get all of you to the point where you can make about $100 an hour. And once you're making $100 an hour playing No Limit Hold'em, which many of my students do, you can then branch out and do kind of whatever you want, because you know you can just go and sit and play for 10 hours and make $1,000. Let's see. How do you select the proper mix of coaches and software to avoid overload, contradictory information? I would generally suggest you study from one or two people who you particularly relate to. That said, we have lots of coaches available for exactly that reason, right? I realize, hey, maybe you all don't like me. Maybe you like Alex Fitzgerald and Matt Affleck instead of me and Lexi or me and Evan, right? Is there news about online poker becoming legal nationally? I don't think so. You have a hard time adjusting to new players? Well, realize if you don't know what your opponent's doing correctly, just try to play fundamentally sound, adjusting for whatever you think the player pool is going to do wrong. Trey said you signed up for 2 years. Awesome. Hope you enjoy it. Hope you learn a ton. And if you have any questions, definitely send me an email. What bankroll advice do I have for 1-3 no limit? Read jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll. If you go to jonathanlittlepoker.com/bankroll, there I have a 20-page long article. I call it the Bankroll Bible. It's not exactly a Bible yet because it's a little bit too short, but it explains how to manage bankrolls in all sorts of scenarios. Can I rehash what I said? Well, yeah. Here are the 5 big leaks of small stakes tournament players. Not adjusting enough to exploit different player types, meaning you just sit there and you play your own 2 cards. Playing too tightly with a short stack, which often results in the small stakes tournament players blinding out, which makes it impossible for them to win. Not protecting their ranges, meaning they leave their checking range very weak, making them really easy to play against. Playing too passively post-flop from the big blind, not check-raising their draws, not check-raising with some of their strong hands, and basically just being easy to play against. And failing to study. You use your winnings to create a bankroll. How do I feel about that? Well, that's exactly what you're supposed to do. You play poker, you win money, and then you have more money in your bankroll. Jared said, you love the quizzes. I'm glad to hear it. When triple barreling is not a mistake, not sure what you're trying to say. How do you handle downswings where you make good decisions but get beat repeatedly? Realize that happens. Whenever you make good decisions, you made money. You made equity. Sometimes you're going to win, sometimes you're going to lose, but as long as you are playing well, you make money in the long run. If you're playing poorly, then, well, you're not going to make money in the long run. And understand that if you are properly bankrolled, and if you do understand the variance that you will encounter from poker, then you will be fine. The problem is a lot of people don't play with an adequate bankroll. They play with a very, very short bankroll. And what ends up happening is they lose 4 or 5 buy-ins playing great. They just get it all in with aces 5 times and lose all 5, which will happen if you play enough. And then they get annoyed and frustrated, and they don't realize that that's going to happen. So if you know it's going to happen, why should you get frustrated at it? It doesn't make any sense. $100 an hour, what stake at how many tables? 1 table of 5-10 no limit. I have multiple students making solid win rates at 2-5 no limit, 5-10 no limits, $500 tournaments, $1,000 tournaments. One of my students just recently decided he normally plays $200 tournaments, but he decided to play a relatively soft $1,000 event in Atlantic City, and he took second place in it, or third place? Second or third place, for like $40,000, and it was a life-changing amount of money for him, which is fantastic, right? Actually, I have a morning show called A Little Coffee. I do it Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 9 a.m. You can find it on Twitter, YouTube, wherever. And 2 days ago, I presented on going for it. That was the topic. And one of my students, who is a very solid winner online, he plays online mostly for practice. He plays high stakes tournaments just for fun. He's a recreational player, but a dedicated recreational player. He chopped a tournament, a $500 buy-in tournament for $70,000, which is fantastic. It's great to hear those kind of success stories, because they are taking the lessons that I teach them. They work hard away from the table, and then they crush the game. Jay says, you don't exploit enough. Thanks for pointing it out. Yeah, good. That's good to know what you are doing wrong, and then you learn how to adjust to fix that. How do you decide to triple barrel or not? If you have an obvious draw with no showdown value, and you think your opponent will fold out appropriately with their marginal hands, I'm probably triple barreling. Well, I already told you in this hand, right? Right here, whenever I check raise the flop and I bet the turn, this hand has almost no showdown value. It loses to better draws, and I'm going to be triple barreling this every time. If I had a hand like 5-4 of clubs, I would definitely triple barrel every single time, because 5-4 cannot win at the showdown. What's a good place to start if you can't get a significant bankroll? If you have no money, if you have literally no money you should get a job, make $10 an hour like I did back in the day. You can scrounge together $50, put it online, play tiny stakes games, and go from there. Do you ever slow down 3-betting if no one fights back? No, just pound them until they start fighting back. Your biggest leak is putting opponents on ranges. So Matthew, this is a big topic, and if you don't put your opponents on ranges appropriately, that will cost you tons of money. And you have to realize that everyone doesn't play like you play, right? A lot of people approach poker from the idea of, I wouldn't do this, so therefore my opponents wouldn't do this. And that's silly, right? You have to understand how each player plays. So you have to spend some time away from the table and at the table putting players on ranges. Just do it in the poker coaching homework challenges. That alone will be very, very helpful. I mean, these hands are all real hands that I played or the other coaches played. And you can try to put opponents on ranges. I mean, you're not always going to get to see the showdown, of course, but sometimes you do. How do you improve the ability to characterize certain players without a heads-up display? You pay attention. Ask yourself always, what is this player's range? What are they doing incorrectly? And what can I do about it? Right? It's not as easy as I have a good hand, so I'm betting, or this guy calls a lot, or this guy folds too much, or this guy's bad. You want to try to figure out what they do incorrectly. Notes and notebooks, says Thomas. Yeah, take notes. I have a video on how I take notes at jonathanlittlepoker.com/notes. Trey says 33 big blinds, 8 under 1600. We have pocket eights. You raise from middle position. Hijack, cutoff, and button call. Flop comes 9, 7, 6. You bet. I would just check. Seems like an easy check. If you do bet and someone raises, you don't fold. Because now you're getting good pot odds, right? So I would have checked the flop because you have a very clear marginal made hand. If it gets checked down, you win a lot of the time. If you check and face a bet, you can easily check call. What was the link to take notes? jonathanlittlepoker.com/notes. And if you have any questions about any of this, you can go back and watch the replay. This replay will be on YouTube. And you can always email me at support@pokercoaching.com with any poker questions, and I will do my best to answer them in a timely manner. I see every email that comes through. We get hundreds of emails a day, but I'm here for all my students to try to help them become the best poker players they can be, assuming they want to be dedicated. And again, a good way to be dedicated is to sign up to a coaching program and actually stick with it. I mean, poker coaching has been around for, I think, 2 years now. And many students signed up right at the beginning and they have stuck with it. And they've gone from being marginal poker players to pretty great poker players. I mean, right here, we have Ken, right? Happy birthday to you. Took first place in event number 18 of the Maryland State Poker Tournament. Couldn't have done it without the work, right? And that's fantastic. That's what I like to see. I like to see recreational players who play when they want to play. They love life. They play for fun, and they play for profit. And that's what I can teach you how to do. So anyway, that's all the questions you all had. So I thank you all for sending them in. I hope you have a great rest of your day. Check out pokercoaching.com/savebig. Hope you enjoyed these quizzes. If you did enjoy the quizzes, at least go to pokercoaching.com and sign up for your completely free trial, because you can go there and there's 20 of them right there for you to battle and test yourselves right now as soon as we are done with this webinar. So thanks a lot. Have a great day. Good luck in your games, and I'll talk to you next time.